It's time for the Sonic Truth Dynasty Focused Fantasy Football Podcast, brought to you by the Player Profiler School of Fantasy Football Podcast, the network. I mean, it is just...
What the hell are you saying? That was the worst introduction I've heard for the show yet.
Yeah, no, I mean, I am just continually...
He's like, I get it. It was terrible.
I wasn't ready for the music, but no, there's just so many of Player Profiler options at this point. I mean, it really is a radio network. By the way, let me just introduce anyone coming to the podcast for the first time. I'm Alan Seslowsky of RotoWire.com, along with Theo, Gremminger, and, of course, the Podfather. And I know I mentioned this about a month ago about the growing number of shows, Theo, as the director of content. I mean, it not only is the number of shows, usually when the volume goes up, the quality suffers. Right now, those graphs are headed in the same direction.
Yeah, I think there's a big demand for high-quality content, and I think we're delivering that. I know we just debuted First Mover last night with Mark Garcia, our DFS show. That's High-Low. If you're probably following him on Twitter if you play high stakes. Very well-known guy in FFPC, and just a really, really sharp mind. I think he's going to crush it this year for us. A really cool show, what he's doing. And then Stack Hunters with Bradley Stalder, our best ball show. That's actually this evening. That's been going very well. And then I debuted a little show called Press Coverage. That's going pretty well. Not a
little show, just not a big deal. It was just about Sigmund Bloom. Then you had Adam Levitan.
Yeah, and
just a little show, not a big deal at all. It's just kind of a show I do off to the side. No one's paying attention. We can't get any guests.
Rich Rebar this Friday.
Oh, God.
Yeah, not bad.
All right, guys. So as the network continues to grow, there's still a demand out there. We take for granted that we've been doing Dynasty and rookie analysis since December. But what I've noticed is that there is a tidal wave of people looking to get into Dynasty startups that are looking to now focus on some trades. Best ball and redraft season's happening, but there's still a thirst for Dynasty. So we are going to serve that content to them right now. But let's look at it from what's going on in the real NFL. Podfather, DeAndre Hopkins signs. It was on this podcast that we talked about that. I'll victory lap a little since my prediction came in, but we predicted on this podcast that DeAndre Hopkins was going to be a favorite to land on Tennessee. I'm curious to what you guys think about this does to not only his 2023 value, but his dynasty value and some of the players around him. Most notably, where is Player Profiler going to be on some of the ancillary pieces like Chig, like Treylon Burks, Podfather?
Well, you're not going to fade Treylon Burks because they add a 31-year-old wide receiver. Okay, if you're high on Treylon Burks, you're high on Treylon Burks. You think that he is the alpha in waiting in Tennessee now. He was the alpha of the moment a week ago, but it's Dynasty. We have these guys for their career. Treylon Burks going into his second year. If it takes an extra year and it's 2024 when he actually has full liftoff and can challenge the wide receiver one tier, which is what he has the ability to do, then so be it. But we're not going to crater him on the Dynasty rankings. I'm sure he barely moved. Not so with Chig. Chig Okonkwo is a tight end, and in most leagues, you'll need to start one. So it's much more of a year-to-year position, and a year delayed for a tight end breakout, he can get passed by guys like Jelani Woods, and a lot of these rookie tight ends are now coming up. You got Michael Mayer, you've got Sam Laporta, you've got Luke Musgrave, and on down the board. I'm not going to mention the guy with the Bills because I'm not as impressed with him as it was the guys that I just mentioned. So now all of a sudden he's just one of those guys. He's in the mix. Now he's in the late teens, in the 20s in terms of seasonal league drafting at the tight end position. And in Dynasty, that's not that valuable. So in tight end premium Dynasty leagues, and especially he takes a major hit, substantial hit, his Dynasty value.
Theo,
Yeah.
I mean, I know that, it's almost like a joke at this point to talk about Chig Okonkwo is a 2023 sleeper because he was everybody's sleeper, which by definition of sleeper makes him not a sleeper. He was tight end 11 on most boards. Where's he going to be moving forward on your board for Dynasty?
So from a redraft perspective,
No redraft. We don't care about redraft.
From Dynasty.
There's two things you can't say on this podcast anymore.
I won't.
It's the word redraft and it's the term better in best ball. Those things are barred from the Sonic Truth podcast. This is like Hot 97 right here, when Funkmaster Flex hits the bombs on everything you say.
His Chicago, his dynasty value exploded in a bad way.
Big time. So, Alan, we also had Evan Ingram re-signing with Jacksonville this year. So Evan Ingram leaps him. Darren Waller probably has to leap him because this year Darren Waller is going to lead New York in targets, and over the next 2 seasons got a much more of a clear path. Matt brought up Treylon Burks. Matt's absolutely right. Treylon Burks is insulated by his draft capital, the fact that we believe in his talent. He can't really fall that much. I think he could potentially fall like maybe 2 spots, 3 spots, because I think his target ceiling is capped this year. It's become like a kind of a thing now to say that Treylon Burks is going to be this year's Devonta Smith because it's going to be a guy that we're sleeping on. It's a terrible argument because
who said that?
Couple Twitter people. We're not. If you want, I'll have to retweet it later. We can call him out. But it's a.
The Eagles' offense is one of the most prolific offenses in the league. Devonta Smith was a Heisman Trophy Award winner and is like 5'10", 170 pounds. I mean, it's hard to think about 2 receivers that are less similar. What the hell?
This time of July, people get a little wild, Matt, with the takes. This is weird take season. But
that's a weird take. Thank you for the weird take. A weird take.
So Theo, specifically the dynasty rankings on PlayerProfiler right now, we have moved Chig off the 12 spot. You named Waller, you named Ingram. How far are you going to move him down? You have once you get into the mid-teens, you got to have guys like Cole Kmet, Luke Musgrave. Does he go below even that tier?
I think he goes below Luke Musgrave, but I think we'll take a glass half full. Is that Chig has flashed a lot of talent. And he could live on touchdowns this year, but it's kind of like, Alan, once you get past that elite tier, it's flat. It's a flat tier. He becomes another touchdown dependent guy with athleticism, and he had wonderful metrics last year, but the sample size was quite small. And it's also like Matt's talked about on this show for months, and we've talked about how this is like a transformative year with the big 4 rookie tight ends coming in. Like all 4 of those guys, plus you have now Evan Ingram insulated, like we talked about. One stat that kind of stands out to me for the pro Treylon Burks 2023 argument, and also the like hope for Chig Okonkwo, the most targets a number 2 target has seen in Tennessee in the Ryan Tannehill era is 92. So Treylon Burks can get over 92 this year and kind of break that. I think that if everything works out and Treylon Burks plays the entire season, I think he's maybe 100 target guy. But DeAndre Hopkins is an alpha. He's going to see the ball a ton, and this is still a run-first Derrick Henry offense. So Chig Okonkwo just becomes a touchdown-dependent guy. Probably should be treated more like tight end 17 than tight end 12.
Is he better in best ball, by the way, you think? I'm just kidding. I'm making the joke. Hey, Podfather,
technically, he is better in best ball.
Yes, absolutely better.
You know who's better in best ball? Everyone.
But Chig in particular, of all the tight ends, he's probably the one that is better in best ball. If not, maybe him or Dawson Knox.
Podfather, that we're talking about, this is all these little avenues are basically off the DeAndre Hopkins signing. Let's talk about the actual guy who got signed for a minute here. I may have gotten a little over my skis talking about DeAndre Hopkins could be one of the top 5 target leaders. I understand that Tennessee, they throw like 27 times a game last year, but that was also including 4 pass attempts per game when Malik Willis was in there. Let's give a conservative but optimistic viewpoint of how many targets per game DeAndre Hopkins should expect, and then we could figure out his fantasy value from there.
I think a bull case is 9 a game, and I think a bear case is 7 a game if they are still really run heavy. So 9 a game would be kind of like That's what he did last year in Arizona. Arizona ran a ton of plays last year. Like, for whatever we want to say about Cliff Kingsbury, Arizona was one of the league leaders in plays per game. So for fantasy, that always correlates to at least more touches for your guys. But D-Hops is an alpha, Alan. Like, he's the kind of guy that commands targets, and he never averaged less than 14. I think it was like 14.7 points per game was his low in any season in Arizona. Last year, he comes off of suspension, looked like he didn't miss a beat. And he's the kind of guy, like, there was all the talk about how him and Bill Belichick would have hit it off completely because they're both these, like, football grinders. Apparently, DeAndre Hopkins just lives for football, constantly working, the kind of guy that wins over a locker room, wins over, constantly in the weight room, working on his craft. So, like, I think that him getting to Tennessee, he's naturally the guy Ryan Tannehill's going to look for. I'll say 130 targets. I'll be interested to see what Billy Muzio and Dario have to say about that. When we change our season-long projections. I didn't say redraft. I said season-long.
Yep. And by the way, that would be 7.6 targets per game.
Yeah, so I'll take somewhere right in the middle. When I wrote my article this week about the reaction, I said I think he'll average what he did in 2021. I think he'll average like 14.5 points per game. I think he's a fine pick where he's going in everywhere. I think if you're a dynasty team that's looking to win this year, you going and getting DeAndre Hopkins for a short buy is perfectly reasonable.
Great. No, it's great. This was a good spot for him.
Yeah.
Think about who else was there in the passing game besides Treylon Burks. We were talking about Chig, like a young, ascending, athletic tight end, and that was it. It was Nick Westbrook-Ikine. That's the position he's taking, right? The ex-receiver was as weak as you could imagine in Tennessee. Treylon Burks is actually a pumped-up Z receiver. That's really where he thrives. He's great on double moves. He's great in the screen game, the bubble screens. That's how you should be using Treylon Burks. He doesn't have the speed of a typical flanker, but that really is where he won in college, and I think where he'll be successful. And posting him up at X is a mistake, and if they were going to try to do that more this year, I think that was going to be one of the ways he's would have failed or flamed out. This protects him, actually. It protects his efficiency, and it's a great wide receiver configuration to have Hopkins winning on an island. You have Burks, out at Z, and he can go into motion a lot and do a lot of creative things. And then you've got your quintessential wide receiver as well. So that does it. It's really just about Nick Westbrook-Ikine in terms of the guy that's going to see his opportunities crater, right? Because Kyle Phillips is still the slot receiver, right? So in terms of fantasy production, overall fantasy production for the league as a whole, this was a very positive development. It just was bad for those of us that have been bullish on Burks and especially Chig. And so we were disappointed to see this, much rather him go to the Patriots where he can hurt fewer young, exciting talents. But in terms of the overall fantasy production and how it's being distributed around the league, taking fantasy points away from Nick Westbrook-Ikine is a good thing. The thing that I would also mention that where I would say the probability that the number 2 receiver in Tennessee actually does command 100-plus targets is the following. 2 years ago, Tennessee was the number 1 seed in the AFC. Because why? AFC South was as bad as you could imagine. Okay? I mean, that was the Carson Wentz Colts. That was rookie year Trevor Lawrence with Urban Meyer. That's how you win all your games in division and get the number 1 seed. This is not the same division. Think about how much improved the Colts are. They had the best draft. They went and got Anthony Richardson. Okay, they still have Jonathan Taylor or Michael Pittman, and they have playmakers on defense. Tennessee's the team that actually didn't improve in the draft as much. They drafted Will Levis. He's not going to play much, right? They did draft the offensive lineman from Northwestern, so that's good. Skoronski, so that helps to improve the offensive line for Derrick Henry. But Derrick Henry is a fade. And Derrick Henry is a fade for a reason that no one talks about. That this team is not going to be nursing 20-point leads like they were 2 years ago. And to a lesser extent last year. The Jaguars could win the Super Bowl. right? They are coming. The Texans are improved across the board, right? They went all in on the draft this past year, and then they went and got C.J. Stroud. So they're going to be a lot better. So Tennessee could completely implode because they have the worst secondary in the league and one of the worst defenses. Okay, so player by player, when you go down the board, I mean, they got Harold Landry, they got some nice pieces on defense, but this is a defense that cannot stop opposing quarterbacks. And the idea they're going to have a winning record this year is complete fiction. They could finish last in the division, and if you're constantly facing negative game scripts, that's how they have to turn up the dial in the passing game. That helps Hopkins and Burks even more than and like I said, it equalizes. Like the Burks target share will likely go down, but the overall number of targets could stay flat because they end up passing more, and it's at the expense of Derrick Henry ultimately.
That's interesting. I never thought that about Derrick Henry's effect if they're a bad team. Theo, let's have a quick break here. When we come back, we'll have closing thoughts on that, and we're going to also talk about Saquon Barkley, Josh Jacobs, Joe Mixon, and some of the other running backs that are having trouble with their fantasy value over the next couple of years. But first, a word from the FFPC.
Hey, people always ask me, what's the World Series of Fantasy? What's the Super Bowl of Fantasy? And it's easy. It's the FFPC. Their signature Players Championship has a $6 million prize pool, and their best ball leagues start in February. And they're the answer to so many questions. Hey, what's the best place to get a Dynasty Orphan? Well, you can adopt a Dynasty Orphan at the FFPC right now. There's more orphans at the FFPC than anywhere else on the internet. That's why we partner with them. So if you want to play fantasy football for low, medium, high stakes, you love Dynasty, you love best ball, you love seasonal leagues, all types of fantasy footballers need to go to the FFPC. And remember, use promo code Underworld. Promo code Underworld gets you $25 off your first team. Promo code Underworld, $25 off your first team, no matter what the format is, at the FFPC. Go get it.
Quick reset here. I'm Alan Seslowsky of RotoWire.com, host of the Sonic Truth Dynasty Focused Fantasy Football Podcast, along with the Podfather and, of course, Theo Gremminger. And Theo, along with any closing thoughts on the Tennessee situation, I want to then move into the Saquon Barkley news, because this is serious business for all leagues, especially Dynasty, because this could be a buying or a selling window. So Saquon Barkley's Dynasty value, Theo, where's it going to be, and what do you think is a reasonable projection for missed games? I think we have to talk about missed games for Saquon Barkley this year.
So I'm sure Matt's going to talk a little bit about the way deals are structured for running backs, but I think that the best argument that I've heard for a fading Josh Jacobs and Saquon Barkley is not that there's going to be a big holdout at the beginning of the year. It's going to be a business decision. Alan, you know how it gets when you get past week 10. Guys' bodies start to break down. And it's more of a potential for guys sitting out, I think, as the season ends. You need to talk about the rest of your career. They're on a 1-year deal. And we're talking about both guys saw a tremendous amount of volume last year in Jacobs and Barkley. And if we're getting to the end of the season and these teams are not playing for something significant, then I think there's a chance that they miss time. I think that that's just human nature. If I think that I'm going to get paid a lot coming down the road, then I need to, manage my load. So I think at the end of the day, it's very difficult for players to hold out these days. It's a different time than even when Lev Bell did it. But for me, I would worry a little bit about, will guys play the full year? Will guys potentially, play through injuries as much? And I don't think it's necessarily an indictment about the players. I think it's actually a smart business decision. This is a business. As much as we want these guys to do great for our fantasy teams, I think that this is something that they've got to take care of on their own. Now, in terms of dynasty value, I was already a little bit lower on Jacobs just because I think that he had his perfect season last year. But I'll maintain a bullish approach on Saquon. I think Saquon Barkley is an elite talent. I think NFL teams will line up to sign him. And I think if he plays half the year and shows what he did last year, then I think that he's a desired free agent. He's also a name that, will sell jerseys, to be honest with you. Like, I think that there's a lot of teams look at him as the kind of guy that will energize their fan base. And I think that there's going to be teams lining up to get Saquon Barkley a year from now. So I don't lower him too much in Dynasty. I'm already very bullish on him as a Dynasty asset. And this doesn't really change things for me. I think that you treat him about the same as you would. But you have to maybe temper your expectations for this year slightly.
Podfather, what does this say about the whole? I mean, there's been a lot of social media discussion. Everyone's an expert on what the running backs should do with everything from forming their own union to holding out together. Why don't you make a little bit of sense of this? Because some people, even though they're just spouting off things, they do have some good points about how the running backs are really having the claw for every dollar that a third wide receiver on a specific team might just get as a default contract.
They have no power, right? These players have no power. Their collective bargaining agreement betrayed them, right? Their union betrayed them.
Explain what you mean by that when they have no leverage. Like, why don't they have leverage?
Because the fine for missing preseason training camp is $50,000 a day, right? At the lowest, depending on, what your level of experience in the league is, it's $40,000, right? It's $40,000 to $50,000 per day in fines. They agreed to this. This was something that they agreed to. They can't afford to hold out. It's not a thing. It's not possible. The owners were so tired of dealing with the specter of players not being available for week 1, and that they said, this is going to be a priority in negotiations, that we kill the holdout dead forever. And they did it. They dangled some other carrots for the players, right? They said, hey, we'll increase your share, even your percentage of the revenue. But we keep the franchise tag, right? We actually can now franchise tag you a second time, right? That used to be that you could only franchise tag a player once. Like, the franchise tag by itself should have never been agreed to. Because what it does is it prevents the growth, the salary escalation year over year by particular positions. When it's backward looking, when you're taking the average of a backward looking average, it serves to be a regressive force on salary growth. So the fact that they ever agreed to the franchise tag was idiotic, right? That was just a mistake by the union. But once the owners had it, the last thing they wanted to do was give up on it. So then they're like, okay, this is a priority for us. Actually, we'd love to even be able to franchise tag these guys a second year. So now a guy like Saquon Barkley, his whole career is now devoted to the Giants, in permanent servitude to the Giants. He's got 5 years because of the fifth-year option, plus 2 more franchise tag years. That's 7 years. Most running backs are out of the league in 7 years. Even the best running backs, the elite of the elite prospects, like Saquon Barkley, a second overall pick, after 7 years, especially 7 years of getting a huge workload starting as a rookie each and every year and dealing with injuries and rehabilitating those injuries, once you've exhausted your 7th year, it's over. So for running backs drafted in the first round, this collective bargain agreement is basically a deal for life with the team. And they cannot hold out. It's not possible. The latest collective bargaining agreement ratcheted up the fine so high that no player, even those with tens of millions of dollars in the bank, like Saquon Barkley, cannot write these checks week after week. They're going to hold out for a week of preseason. We're talking about a week of preseason, and then they have to return. They have no choice. So this isn't really a debate. I saw this on the show sheet, and I yawned because I know it's meaningless. Tony Pollard knows. He's just like, you know what? Can we just skip right to it? I'm going to play. I have to play. they fucked me, right? The union fucked me. He might as well have said that. Maurice Smith, thank you very much. I have to play on this. And this charade that I might hold out is just a waste of everyone's time. Thank you, Tony Pollard, for your honesty. Saquon and Josh Jacobs are just going through the motions, and it's nothing to see here.
Yeah, well, Theo, but I'm just going to add before we go back over to you that in Tony Pollard's case, you can almost understand it. He doesn't have that longer resume, that multi-year resume, but the point
he's happy
stands.
to play on it.
Right.
But even if he didn't, he's like, well, what am I going to do?
The other leverage piece that the running backs could do is they could hold in. They could show up, but just not do anything. They can go off to the side here. But I guess really, what is the solution?
Holding in's not a thing, right?
I mean, you can show up to practice and not participate. I mean, that would
Have you ever played sports, Alan?
Of course.
You have? Okay, so how it works is when you play sports is that if you're that guy that's healthy and you're not participating in the drills with your teammates, you're shamed into it. Not even explicitly. You're implicitly. Oh, yes, absolutely.
No.
That's
We've
not
seen
a
guys
thing.
hold in already. We've seen guys hold in
I know,
already.
but they say it, but it's not real. They're participating. Okay, they're participating, and maybe a guy like Saquon Barkley in his second year being franchise tagged would be able to hold in, and no one would hold it against him, and he has the gravitas with the teammates that he wouldn't be feeling the pressure to participate. Maybe in that one case, but that's it. Come on, man.
Go ahead, Theo.
I was going to say that I think there's going to be, it's very interesting because if Breece Hall comes back strong this year and plays like he did last year, and then you have Bijan Robinson and you have Jahmyr Gibbs, if they break out this season like some are predicting, I think there's going to be a real push from some of these players to try to renegotiate after year two, not participate in offseason. And I think players are going to try to get around this. There's no answer for it because, like Matt said, the deal is the deal, and the union, made no favors to these running backs with the way everything's structured out. So I think it's, it is what it is. Running back is a position where NFL teams can use you up on your rookie deal, and then just franchise tag you twice and have a kind of volume Josh Jacobs saw last year, and that's probably the plan this year as well. So.
Here's what my former colleague, Chris Liss, he had an interesting tweet, and it's very short. I'll read it here. He said, running back careers are more compressed than, say, wide receiver or quarterback, so they need more money per year at their peak, but salary cap is fixed, so the more expensive peak running back doesn't work for the teams. One solution is running back salaries only count 50% towards the cap. That way the teams can pay up for their peak running back years if they want them. What do you think about something like that, where having only a part of the cap count towards the overall cap? So if teams want to pay that premium on the side for running backs,
is this Chris Liss?
Yeah.
So Chris Liss doesn't think the salary cap is complicated enough?
That's a good point.
Wait, it's not complicated enough, Chris? You want to add more red tape and more complications of the salary cap? And by the way, you think Breece Hall is going to miss a mandatory minicamp, right? You think he's going to hold out a mandatory minicamp? Well, here's how the fines are structured for mandatory minicamp holdouts. You ready for this? $16,459. Where they came up with that number, I don't know. That's for the first day you miss mandatory minicamp. Then it's $32,920, and then it ratchets up to $50,000 a day for the third day that you miss of mandatory minicamp. Oh, baby, it is mandatory. And this whole idea of holding out is just not something you are going to be able to do. You need to be prepared to play on the franchise tag and play out your entire contract until you become an unrestricted free agent. Once you become an unrestricted free agent, and only once you become an unrestricted free agent based on this bad deal that the players signed, thanks to Maurice Smith and company, because of this, there's no such thing as holding out, and the only guys that are able to choose with a clear head and open eyes to not show up are those that are unrestricted free agents and have not signed with a single club. They can feel free. If you're an unrestricted free agent and you haven't signed yet, you should feel free to stay home and watch TV, and you don't have to go anywhere. You don't have to do anything. But if you are under any kind of contract with the NFL, you're showing up, period, and I don't want to hear about it again.
You know who read
until they renegotiate. But they won't.
You know who read the room
won't.
properly, guys? Joe Mixon. He took the pay cut, right? But I took a look at that contract. It looks like Joe Mixon is going to be on this roster for 2 more seasons based on the salary, how it's structured. Theo, I'm thinking that where most running backs are a year-to-year proposition outside of the rookies and the young 20, the Kenneth Walker types, is Joe Mixon have a little bit of sneaky dynasty value here, or everything you saw from him last year, you just don't want any part of it still? Like, I mean, you're going to be making decisions in dynasty startups between Alexander Mattison and Joe Mixon based on that contract insulation.
Give me Joe Mixon over Alexander Mattison in Dynasty all day long.
Oh my God, is this a thing?
No,
I mean, they're going
a
back
conversation that people are having, like Alexander Mattison versus Joe Mixon. Joe Mixon with his contract, he bumped up 10 lifetime value points in our Dynasty rankings. Yeah. He's a top 24 back in Dynasty, baby.
That
absolutely. Low, he just turned 27. He has his age 27 and age 28 seasons as the clear primary back for the Bengals. They didn't backfill him with anyone of consequence. And don't tell me, Chase Brown, he cannot play. It's been determined that he stinks. He was at the Senior Bowl. He had the worst Senior Bowl of any running back we've ever seen. He wasn't impressive at Illinois. He just happened to be an athletic guy. And there's a lot of athletic guys like Sean Tucker and so many back through time that have completely flamed out. So don't give me Chase Brown. Get out of here.
Yeah, and Mixon last year, Alan, like the thing that we want to see for aging running backs is increased use in the passing game. That's, save him a few in between the tackles runs and just simply pass him the ball. And last year, Joe Mixon saw a career high in terms of a number of catches. This year, I think that trend is going to continue. These quarterbacks, as they get a little bit older, they all seem to like to have check down options. And I think Burrow is going to utilize Mixon in that sense. Matt makes a great point. Like, I think if Joe Mixon went down, they're going in and signing one of these veterans that are on the street.
Oh, yeah.
There's a number of them. Yeah.
Yeah, so they did not go out and draft a Kendre Miller. They did not go out and draft a Roshan Johnson, a Tajay Sharp, a real running back we know is good. Even Chase Brown, a guy with that profile, that level of explosiveness at that size, he should be catching 40 passes a year in college. He only caught 27. His college target share, 8.2%, 66th percentile, was pathetic given his athletic profile, given the supporting cast they had to work with at Illinois. He should have been a focal point of that offense in the passing game. He was not, because he's not a quality receiver out of the backfield. He's literally good at nothing except being fast and explosive in the workouts in Indianapolis. He excels in one place and one place only, Indianapolis. That's it.
Yeah, no, you made a lot of sense there. But, you're seeing Alexander Mattison. You look at the contract insulation. Dynasty players are, again, I'm not saying I'm surprised they're becoming smarter and smarter, but there's so much good quality content that even the average person that's been playing for like 2 years understands that a running back that has multiple years is a valuable piece. And that's why I brought up Alexander Mattison. I mean, guys, his role for this year, I mean, he's going to be one of the stories of Dynasty fantasy football. Theo, is he just a guy? Team context? What do you think that when it's all, unwound here, like what is Alexander Madison's actual production going to look like?
So I'll say that there's the Evan Silva factor. Silva moved him up. Matt, I don't know if you saw Silva's rankings, but I happened to see him, and Evan Silva moved Alexander Mattison up to like 24th overall in his pre-draft rankings. So he's polarizing right now, Alan. I'm with the Podfather. I'm not drafting him. I know you have a no redraft rule, but let me talk redraft for 1 second.
I mean, if it's in context of Dynasty, yeah,
in context of Dynasty, redraft has to be the argument for Alexander Mattison because it is a 1 year thing. I find it hard to believe that Minnesota a year from now, even if Alexander Mattison starts this year, they're not going to upgrade their position a year from now. Now, there's also a chance that Alexander Mattison disappoints. This is a guy that last year, Kevin O'Connell.
There's a chance that he disappoints.
He couldn't crack 100 carries last year, Alan. The guy had like less than 90 carries in Kevin O'Connell's first season in Minnesota. Now people are saying he's going to go to 250 carries. It's
but
crazy.
that's also like saying, if you're on a team with Steph Curry, that you're not going to get a lot of shot attempts. You know what I'm saying? Like you're on a Dalvin Cook is one of those guys that he commands a lot of.
That's fine.
touches.
That's fine. That's a fair argument. But Alexander Mattison was brought in by the previous coaching staff. I just think Alexander Mattison, at the end of the day, if you're talking redraft, you can get Cam Akers right at the same spot. I'm taking Cam Akers every single time. It's not even close. But I'll say this, Alan, you bring up the smart dynasty manager. I have Alexander Mattison on a few FFPC dynasty teams. And I went on and the little message board and I said, Alexander Mattison, 24 first, come and get him. I get 0 offers.
Well, that's not the value because that's not the value.
Well, usually
but
when
you said top 24 player in seasonal leagues who's 23, 24 years old.
But that's not how value works in Dynasty, and Theo knows that. He was trying to ask for a reach. If you would have said, hey, give me 2 seconds for him, you're going to have people negotiating with you because he's a polarizing guy in the content world, no one's going to feel good about laying down a $100 bill, a first-round pick on the counter for him. Now, if he
way to handle...
I stand corrected. I stand corrected. He's not 24. I stand corrected.
25, right?
He just turned 25.
Yeah.
So there you go. And I'll say that the way you handle Alexander Mattison right now in Dynasty, if you're trying to get out from him, like Alan said, you're not going to get that first-round pick.
Not yet.
I think Alexander Mattison is a package guy. Do it 2 for 1, and he's he is on paper absolutely the starting running back for Minnesota right now. Right. I think that's what they want.
On paper.
Like you might be able to tier up. You might be able to tier up from like quarterback 18 to quarterback 12 with Alexander Mattison as that piece to get you there. I mean, or wide receiver 38 to wide receiver 23. That's how you use Mattison if you want to unload him. But if Mattison comes out and has 2 good weeks in a row, you're going to see. I mean, obviously, dynasty players try to think of ourselves as long-term thinkers. We're not. We're as susceptible to short-term bias as anyone else, guys.
He was so average in college. He was an average college running back at Boise State, and some scouts liked his film, thought he ran hard. Big deal. Yep. Last year, he ran hard last year, right? He ran hard last year. He had how many carries? Yeah, what do you have? 74 carries? 74 carries. 1 breakaway run. Because he runs a 4.67. That's why.
He doesn't have to be good.
Breakaway
he doesn't
run.
have to be good. He's going to get the opportunity. They did pay him. He did stay when he had the chance to leave.
They didn't pay him anything. They paid him $2 million a year.
That's starter money nowadays.
No, it's not starter money nowadays. That's backup running back money nowadays. I know running backs don't make that much, but they do make more than $2 million a year. Starting running backs make more than $2 million a year. He was not efficient at all. And we talk about, you're trying to hit me with like Rachaad White. His yards per carry was below 4. That's a red flag. Well, Alexander Mattison, in the prime of his career, his age 23 and 24 season, when running backs are their most explosive, he was below a 4.0 yards per carry both seasons. That's not even something I would like obsess over. But you people, like you're so fickle about which metrics you want to look at and when you want to look at them. Wait, what are we talking about? Okay? It's like the whole thing with Rachaad White is, yes, he had a year where their offensive line was completely demolished, as was the Vikings' offensive line last year, by the way. I understand that. Part of it was the offensive line, disintegrated in front of our eyes, just like what happened with Tampa. But we're talking about 2 straight years as opposed to 1 year with Rachaad White. And the whole case with Rachaad White is he's electric and efficient in the passing game. Alexander Mattison isn't even that. 0.73 yards per route run for Alexander Mattison was number 84 among running backs with 50 or more snaps last season. What are we talking about? He is the 4th best running back on that roster. If you're a coach and you're trying to figure out which running back to put in different scenarios, in different game situations, well, Kene Nwangwu offers more on special teams and can give you big, boom, explosive runs. Okay, so he offers you a little bit more in particular situations, right? Ty Chandler's much better in the passing game than Alexander Mattison. He's actually explosive. And Dwayne McBride, for all the positive attributes around Alexander Mattison as a runner, Dwayne McBride's a better runner. Dwayne McBride's a better tackle breaker and was in college than Alexander Mattison ever was in college. So the fact of the matter is that Alexander Mattison is better than no one at nothing on this Vikings roster. So the idea that you would draft him with any kind of valuable draft capital, knowing that he is the ultimate Jag player in the NFL today, is absurd.
Yep. Ty Chandler's my bet, Alan, for a guy that I want to stash. And certainly on teams that I can't get rid of Alexander Mattison, I'll look to grab some Ty Chandler. I like McBride a lot. Matt and I talked about him at length. But again, McBride doesn't have any history of catching the football. So I think Ty Chandler is my best pass. And I'll say this was excellent take by the Podfather here, because years ago, Matt, you would have talked about the mountain whack and how the mountain whack doesn't give us too many running backs, Matt. You can count on one hand. I understand what the guy did at Boise State, but Rashad
it was
Penny,
the mountain whack. You know what his yards per carry was? If you go all the way back there, that was like you said, their offensive line crumbled. Okay, so their offensive line crumbled last year. Well, let's go all the way back to Boise State. His 19th percentile college yards per carry. What are we talking about? He couldn't even garner a 5.0 yards per carry in the mountain whack conference. He's terrible. It's offensive to anyone with a brain that you would put a player that's not good in an echelon with other good players. It's the easiest hack for fantasy football, to look at a list of rankings or an ADP board and just get out a Sharpie and just cross off the first couple players you see that aren't good.
DFS take lock, Matt. Alexander Mattison, it's DFS take lock. People used him in DFS when he's chalk. He produced big time. But Alan, he's been in the league for 3 straight years, and he's only given us consecutive RB2 weeks one time in his entire career, where he gave us top 24 weeks, back-to-back weeks. Most of the time, it's Dalvin Cook's out, Alexander Mattison steps in, sees the volume, Dalvin Cook returns. It doesn't matter if the guy gave you 25 fantasy points the week before. He becomes a non-factor completely. And I think that talented backs chip away. You look at the backs that broke out, like the Tony Pollard argument, these guys that sat and then saw increased time, they still flashed and give you an incredible workload. And also, they cracked into the starting running back. We haven't seen that with Mattison. I think it's just fool's gold right now.
He was efficient. Pollard was efficient.
Yes.
He was giving you like 5.0 yards per carry, huge yards per touch numbers. Like, it was so clear. He was creating yards on his own. He was efficient in the passing game. The things that are indicative of future production in the league, if given opportunity. You're the opposite is with Alexander Mattison, is that he went into the free agent market and he got crickets, right? And then they said, yeah, we'll sign you for the bare minimum and we bring you back. And now that we have depth, this gives us the opportunity to let Dalvin go. We don't care about the running game. We're going to be throwing the ball, right? It's just...
Our guy in the chat, Robert Nimmo, he had a really interesting comparison. He said this is Myles Gaskin from like a couple of years ago. I thought that was funny.
Or Mike Davis.
Well, Mike Davis, you knew he was bad, right? That was a pure value play.
This is the same situation, Alan.
No, this is not as bad.
Mike Davis.
No, this is Myles Gaskin. That's a really good one.
This is
people thought Gaskin might be good,
but
I mean, there's a difference.
Gaskin is better than Alexander Mattison. Do you understand that? Do you understand that Myles Gaskin is actually a better receiver than Alexander Mattison, and that actually has some value to an NFL team? There's no value to an NFL team. If I'm an NFL general manager, I'm not signing Alexander Mattison for anything. He knows the playbook. He only has value to the Vikings. That's the only team he has any value because he knows the playbook. He knows where to be. He knows the blocking scheme, so he can make sure that Kirk Cousins doesn't get killed on a blitz up the middle. That's the value that he actually has in real life. That's why the Vikings would sign him to a bare minimum backup running back contract, and no one else had any interest in him whatsoever.
All right, guys, I think we covered Alexander Mattison. We're going to move on. Theo put a video up of Skyy Moore, the second-year wide receiver on the Kansas City Chiefs, where he was taking note that Skyy Moore is now starting to move up rankings. A note came out today, a blurb, Podfather, that Skyy Moore looks like he's the locked-in slot guy. I mean, we've been looking for a second-round wide receiver to break out. We've been looking for any wide receiver that's not Travis Kelce, any pass catcher to break out. Theo Gremminger, Skyy Moore is still very gettable in leagues. I'm not saying he's free or he's cheap, but you can't get, right now you can't get Garrett Wilson. You can't get Chris Olave, right? You have to really crack open. You have to mortgage your home for it. But Skyy Moore, is this someone that you're willing to overpay a little bit because you're going to see by this time next year, we're talking about him as a top 15, top 18 type of receiver?
I don't think he's got top 15, top 18 in the range of outcomes in terms of dynasty, but I do think he's a guy that could be a very useful player for us this year and moving on. One thing that I think that he does stylistically for them is he can do a lot of the running plays that they ran for Tyreek Hill. Skyy Moore can do that. He's talented with the ball in his hands. Redraft players are already starting to steam him up a little bit. I think dynasty managers, I've seen a few trades for Skyy Moore, or certainly teams trying to get Skyy Moore as part of an add-on. Right now, it's up for grabs. Like Rashee Rice comes in, they're speaking highly of him as well. Kadarius Toney, it's the annual Kadarius Toney time in the offseason where people are going to get super hopeful. Skyy Moore, I think, is more of a potential threat to Toney because I think a lot of the stuff they do is stylistically similar. But listen, all three of these guys are affordable right now for our dynasty teams. All three of them are attached to the best quarterback in football and one of the best offenses in football. So, yeah, absolutely, I want to have some Skyy Moore. It's usually a better bet to fade the year two wideout that did nothing as a rookie. You could talk about your DJ Sharks all you want, but most of the times if a guy doesn't shine as a rookie at all, he completely fades away. But I do think that Kansas City was interesting last year in the sense that they do a lot of things differently. And a lot of times Andy Reid doesn't trust the young guys as much as some other coaches. So I'm in on Skyy Moore. I think he's a speculative guy. I don't want to overpay for him, but he's a good speculative buy. I saw a lot of cagey like FFPC dynasty managers trading like a third round pick, a second round pick to try to get Skyy Moore, during the rookie drafts. And, they were successful doing that. So I'm in on Skyy. I am bullish. I think he's interesting. And I think that if it hits, he could really hit.
Podfather, if you're a team and you're looking to acquire youth and maybe shed some of your veterans, would you give up an established player with a little bit of age on him like Mike Williams for Skyy Moore? Where are you at right now for his dynasty value? Skyy Moore's.
I'd rather have Skyy Moore. Yeah, I'd rather have Skyy Moore. I love Skyy Moore. I don't think Mike Williams is going to help me win any leagues. So for that reason, unless it's a very deep league, like if I'm starting 4 receivers, 5 receivers, I'd rather have Mike Williams because I'm here to win leagues, right? But in a traditional league where you start 2 or 3 receivers, 1 or 2 flex positions, you probably have better options week in, week out than Mike Williams. So Skyy Moore is a great option. Skyy Moore, his profile is so good. It's such a high floor profile where you have Stephon Diggs, Golden Tate, Christian Kirk. His archetype of player has so many hits. The guys that were dominant in college, we're talking about a 45% dominator rating, and he did it at a young age. He came out early from Western Michigan. That never happens. It's a very rare thing. Think about a guy that was the all-time leader in receiving yards at Western Michigan. You know who it is? It's easy.
Is it Skyy Moore?
This is an easy one. No, it's Corey Davis.
Oh, Corey Davis.
Yeah, one of the reasons why is because he played all 4 years. Okay, right. Like he crushed. Like he was 1,500 yards every year. Right,
top 10 real NFL pick. Yeah,
man. That's how you get drafted in the top 10. But he was a senior. See, that was the big red flag. The big red flag on the Corey Davis profile was he was a senior. Skyy Moore came out early, got drafted by the Chiefs, and he was not big enough for the moment. And as a rookie, did not get the trust of the coaching staff, a coaching staff that just brought in a front office that just signed Marquez Valdez-Scantling, who had already been through it with Aaron Rodgers. So it makes sense that with so much on the line and so much at stake that they would pick their spots with Skyy Moore, but they did pick their spots. And he did get 33 targets, right? And in that AFC Championship game against the Bengals, he was on the field more than he wasn't. He had 7 targets in that game. So you see these flashes where guys are getting more comfortable, they're getting acclimated, and then when you zoom out and they have the profile that so often hits in the NFL, that's why you see these savvy dynasty leaguers trying to steal him away in the offseason before he becomes the number 1 receiver. Like, he is better, right? We talk about who's better, any other running back on Minnesota or Alexander Mattison, right? Same is true of Kadarius Toney. Everybody's better than Kadarius Toney. Kadarius Toney is bad. Very, very bad. So bad they invested a first-round pick, and then after 2 years, New York just said, ah! Right? They just said, whatever you want to give for him, we'll just get rid of him. We can't use this guy, and we're going to make a go of it with Isaiah Hodgins. That's what New York said. That's how bad Kadarius Toney is. It was a bad pick. He's a running back trying to play wide receiver, but he actually doesn't invest in improving his craft. So he's just out there getting by on athleticism. It was frustrating for coaches trying to figure out what to do with him, even at the Senior Bowl. Okay, and he's going to frustrate coaches until he's out of the league. A guy like Skyy Moore is a traditional Z receiver in that Golden Tate, Christian Kirk mold where he can come in on the bubble screens, he can run your double moves. He's not going to be like a big-time target commander throughout his career, but he's going to be in that 90 to 110 target zone when he's at his best during his prime, and he's going to give you these big boom seasons, these 1,100-yard seasons, tethered to Patrick Mahomes. It's going to be great. So get on board now. You got to go get him. It's too late in some leagues that now that the news is out that he's starting in the slot, and now all of a sudden,
well, how about this? How about
someone
this?
If someone has Skyy Moore, they're suddenly like, oh no, I hear the good news about him, and now the other managers are trying to trade for him. Oh no, they're going to clutch him tight. They're not going to let him go. You can't get him for Mike Williams anymore. Those days are gone. Understood. But we've always liked Skyy Moore because his profile aligns with the positive archetypes around the league, and it also on the other end of the spectrum. It's why we're out on a Quentin Johnston, because Quentin Johnston's profile is similar to so many busts. That's the difference between these two guys, both in the AFC West.
Alan, I'll give you one Skyy Moore stat that I found super interesting. Skyy Moore last season was the first early declare non-Power 5 guy to go in the second round since Davante Adams. That's how special he was as a prospect. And we talk about no one is saying he is going to be Davante Adams, but it was another guy that when you level up as a receiver coming from a conference like that, and certainly Davante Adams is playing at a higher level in the Mountain West than the MAC for Skyy Moore. It takes those guys a little while in the NFL. But last year was a deep wide receiver class. We saw so many guys hit, and Kansas City still prioritized more in that second round. So first early declare non-Power 5 conference guy since Davante Adams to go in the second round. I think that was wild.
He belongs in the tier with Elijah Moore and Darnell Mooney, because Darnell Mooney has hit, right? Darnell Mooney was a 4th-round pick with super speed. He's going to be a starter, and he had a season where he actually hit. So he's already, he's already sort of, but he's in a much worse situation for scoring fantasy points at the wide receiver position than Skyy Moore. That's why those guys are equivalent, right? Elijah Moore also is very similar to Skyy Moore in that Elijah Moore has a profile that when you zoom out frequently hits, And he would normally be a better prospect and more valuable than Skyy Moore, but like Kadarius Toney, he's had a team give up on him already. So that's what brings him down to the Skyy Moore level. The player you need to have below Skyy Moore, okay, as a rule, you cannot look at me in the face and say, hey, we've got this player ahead of Skyy Moore. You can't have Rashee Rice ahead of Skyy Moore. That makes no sense. Rashee Rice was drafted in the same spot by the same team, but he was a senior. He was not a junior. And his profile was not as dominant and as dominant at an early age as Skyy Moore's was. So if you are zooming out and you're looking at players apples to apples, there's no case to be made to have Rashee Rice ahead of Skyy Moore.
Yeah, so if we're going to talk about actionable dynasty trades, guys, so all right, Mike Williams, you would think that would get declined. Theo, what if
I would say, Alan, that's exactly the kind of trade. I think depends on the manager, because I think managers who are with the perception of win now, I think you can get that trade done. And Mike Williams, as much as
that's a trade. That's a trade you can get done. Oh yeah.
Here's another name that I want to throw out there that I think that what if the manager came back to you and said, "Oh, okay, Theo, you want Skyy Moore from me? Give me Calvin Ridley." What would you do then?
I'm taking Calvin Ridley, even though he's a fade for me, because Calvin Ridley is in one of the best offenses in football right now. And I think that Jacksonville still has a plan for him. I mean, as much as I think Calvin Ridley is a fade in redraft based on where he's going, he's still attached to Trevor Lawrence, and I still have an idea of him. Whereas Mike Williams, there's Keenan Allen, there's Quentin Johnston, there's Gerald Everett, there's multiple mouths to feed. And also we've seen Mike Williams struggle to get over like the 20% target share. As much as I'm not into Calvin Ridley, I think that he's going to see 22%, something like that. And I'm going to keep Ridley in that scenario over Moore. Now, if I could get Moore plus, then I'm thinking about that. I think that's a trade you could absolutely get done based on how red hot Ridley is right now in redraft.
Yeah.
Mike Williams is going rounds after Ridley right now. Ridley's a 3rd round pick on Underdog and Best Ball. He's a 3rd round pick in FFPC. He's a 3rd round pick in NFFC, high stakes draft. So like you can get Skyy Moore plus a ton draft capital.
Yeah, that's what I would do. That's a real life trade where you can say, hey, I have Ridley, give me Skyy Moore and a 2nd rounder. I'll do it.
And what side of that would you want to be on, Podfather?
The Skyy Moore side.
Okay.
Just go to we have a trade analyzer on Player Profiler in the Dynasty Deluxe section. There's a trade analyzer, and you can see that a Skyy Moore and a 2nd rounder for Calvin Ridley would crush. We also have the Dynasty Dominator app, which has the trade analyzer. You can just have it on your phone, and you will see that crushes. Skyy Moore plus a 2nd rounder would crush with a lot of these exchanges, probably going all the way up to, say, Terry McLaurin. Skyy Moore and a 2nd rounder would crush.
Matt, let everybody know where they can get the Dynasty Dominator app, because honestly, like, even if I didn't work at Player Profiler, it's an incredible tool. I have it on my phone. I use it all off season.
Well, there's these places that you can go to get apps on your phone, Theo. So there's the App Store.
Tell me more.
Yeah,
tell me more.
Yes, I would love to. Oh, thanks for asking. There's the App Store on Apple, and there's Google Play on Android. And yes, it is an actual app. It's always amazes me how few apps there are in fantasy. We have the Dynasty Dominator app, we have the Injury Finder app, we have the Breakout Finder app, and guess who rates well in the Breakout Finder? Skyy Moore, right?
No brainers, guys. If you're listening to us right now, you want these apps on your phone. They're awesome.
And though those are pay apps, right? It's the Player Profiler is not. They are about charity as well, right, Podfather? I mean, there's some charities that you do get involved with. I mean, you are asking people to pay for this great, valuable piece of this great app, which, by the way, I'm a subscriber to. But
it's like basically they're $5 a year. Like you pay, or the first year you pay $10, and the next year you pay $5 for the new 2023 class. So basically, with the Dynasty Dominator app, you get the app for $5. You load the current year for $5. It's $10 total. Then every year it's $5 to load the new rookie class. So that's the add-on. The add-on in-app purchase is to get the current rookie class is $5. That's it.
Yep.
It's a great deal. Same thing with the Breakout Finder. And then with the Injury Finder, it's $5 and an additional $5 to get like our enhanced injury predictions and fragility ratings. That's a one-time purchase. And then again, to get the rookies loaded every year, it's $5. Like,
and by the way,
it's always a $5 fee every year, but that's incredibly reasonable. You're not going to get anything for free that's better, and you're certainly not going to pay any less than that. And no, we're not in the charity business, though I am participating. Thank you for reminding me, Alan. That I see what you did there. You're a great host. I'm making everything right in the world, because my wife reminded me last night. She said, "Hey, don't forget, we're participating in this Connecticut Challenge, which is this bike race. It's like a 20+ mile bike race, and all the proceeds go to the Connecticut Challenge, which helps those that have survived cancer. They're cancer survivors." And I was like, "Oh my Lord, this is the absolute perfect cause for me to get behind." And I was like, so this thing got posted on Twitter, and then immediately I could see her eyes glaze over, right? So I was like, "Honey, let me tell you, okay, I'm so excited to do this Connecticut Challenge. Let me explain to you what happened to me on Twitter." And then again, her eyes just like, she's like, "Oh no, what have I? Please don't." Right? Please, I don't care. Please don't talk. I don't want to know this. Please don't even, because she could see that I'm getting ready to rant, and I'm excited. And she's like, "No, please, for the love of God, don't." But it's too late. It's too late. And I'm like, so what ended up happening was, there was this whole misperception that I, was disparaging James Conner, who was a cancer survivor, and people on Twitter that don't listen to the show hate me because of it. And now I can tell everybody that I'm making it right, even though I never made it wrong. This is exciting. We can put the link in the description, and people can donate, and we'll raise a ton of money, and this is great. And she goes, "No." And I was like, "What do you mean? This is perfect. This is great. What do you mean? This couldn't be better. This is like the center of the Venn diagram of life." And she's like, No. And I'm like, "What? But, no." She's like, "This is not going to turn into a Podfather, look at me, selfish act."
A bit. She doesn't want it to be a bit.
This is not a bit. This is a serious organization that I support, and this is my initiative. I'm barely even inviting you, and no, I don't need your help fundraising. I can do it on my own. Thank you very much. And she was like furious. She was like, her eyes were like blazing. And I was like, I was like, "What did I do? What did I say? What do you mean? I thought I was trying to help." She's like, "You're not trying to help. You're doing this for you. You're doing this for your reputation, and you're doing this because you think it's good content. And I'm not here, and the people at the Connecticut Challenge are not here to support your content. So you can pound sand and don't mention a word of this on your podcast."
So you didn't. You obeyed. You didn't say.
So I didn't mention it. I didn't talk about. What I told her, I was like, "Fine, I won't share the link. You won't get any random donations from people. I promise. I'm not gonna solicit donations." Right. So now it's the worst of both worlds. Now I get the credibility and the prestige and the reputation washing from the charity, but my wife, who's organizing it, doesn't get the additional donations. That's the position that we're in. And my response to her was, "Okay, I understand what you're saying. You're accusing me of taking something that is
pure, holy,
altruistic, right, and turning it into something selfish, right? But this has been a philosophical debate for 100 years. is whether altruism is at its roots selfish. Because why do it if you don't feel good giving back?
Matt, maybe we could get for Player Profiler TikTok and Twitter a couple shots of you cycling, and maybe link it into some sort of content as well. We're going to tie it all together.
I should give some takes from the bike. I had a great take from a bike. Remember I said that Sam Darnold stinks?
But
I just drafted him in the Scott Fish Bowl. I'm now drafting Sam Darnold. I'm trying to get him in all these super flex dynasty leagues. I want Sam Darnold. Now that there's a whisper campaign that Atlanta is interested in Trey Lance, which makes Trey Lance more interesting, but also necessarily makes Sam Darnold more interesting because then all of a sudden he's just the guy behind the guy that just got Tommy John surgery.
Alan, when you get on a bike, do you wear the full cycling outfit, the bike shorts, the full-on like tight shirt and everything, Alan? When you're in Florida on that bike?
You don't understand. This is a whole problem for me, Theo. I literally have major like ball problems because of this thing. I have to have that big like fat bicycle seat, the one that's like basically like a lazy boy couch. It honestly looks like I'm a sicko, like one of those adults riding a kid's bike in like New York City with like a flag on it. I have a problem because it literally goes. The seats irritate me, so I need to wear like double shorts. I need to wear multiple pairs of underwear because I just can't. My under part, the carriage.
You have like grapefruit balls.
Oh my god!
Oversized balls.
Very small penis, very big balls.
Alan, and how about the leg shaving? Do you go in for a wax?
No. I like hairy legs. I like hairy legs.
On the bike?
And I tell you, one of the things I actually do like also is I like women with hairy legs too. It's always been a thing of mine. I don't know why.
What are you saying?
You remember you'd go to New York City, Theo, and you'd see like Wee magazine, those things that have the women with the hairy armpits. That was always listen. Everyone has a kink. That's one of my kinks. I like women with hairy armpits.
Hey, should we interview Alan's penis right here? Hey, Alan's penis. What's going on?
He can't even hear you because the huge balls blocking the sound.
I mean,
they look like they're swollen. That's the problem. I always do.
Alan, this is a great segue. How was your trip to Las Vegas with the RotoWire guys?
Well, we had a nice trip. Actually, you know what's funny? I actually have some good actionable intel from that trip. But we're all over the place right now, guys.
What's the actionable intel? What do you mean? You can't just drop that and then walk away.
It was more from a gambling perspective. We had this great guy named Bill. So anyone, just to catch you up, RotoWire had our annual trip at the Circle Las Vegas. We have meetings, you go over strategy, all these different things from business perspective, content. But one of the best speakers there was this guy, Bill Barnwell, who's a credible reporter. And he was talking about...
Oh, Bill Barnwell from ESPN?
Yeah, I know Bill Barnwell. That's big time.
Yeah, everyone knows Bill Barnwell. That's amazing. He's one of the original sort of analytics writers.
He was like Adam Schefter's mentor. So you guys know who he is. So he was there. He was our like keynote speaker. He now works for RotoWire and Gambling.com. So he's now part of the company. And basically he went state by state talking about the legalization process. And he said the big three states, that really would send gambling like to to the masses: Florida, Texas, and California. And he talked about like the I don't want to bore you with the details, but he talked about like the probabilities and the obstacles to legalization. So that was the actual. He basically said California is almost a 0% chance of ever happening at this point, and Texas, while the lieutenant governor is there, the guy who is the lieutenant governor, 0 chance of happening. So, and then he went through it. I don't want to bore you with as much or as little as you like.
We lost.
I'm sorry I asked. I'm really sorry.
I don't want to bore you with the details.
Yeah, that was really boring.
We lost like 10 viewers when Alex.
That was crazy. That was one of the more boring things. You went from great big ball, small dick talk to
Theo brought up Vegas, and then you said
random Bill Barnwell's probability of Texas getting gambling. No one cares.
I didn't think that was listen, Alan. The last time you talked Las Vegas on this pod, it was legendary. We talked about your bachelor party. Now now you expected
to
have
a business trip. This was a business.
Okay, that's fair. That's fair. Circus Sports, amazing spot. Great spot.
Also, you can't go too crazy. You have your work people there, so you can't get too. There were people that got too drunk. There were people that got too.
Can I be honest with you guys? Can I tell you something? I mean, I'm very happy with my penis size. Very happy. Very happy.
I mean, who's happy with it? You know, there's an old Joe Rogan joke that if they actually had penis enlargement pills that worked, the first overdose would be in the first 7 minutes. You know what I mean? Like, nobody's happy with their penis size.
I'm very happy. And the shape, too. But I got to tell you, I don't know whether I have big or small balls.
Well, then
like,
you
I
don't.
couldn't tell. I have no idea what size they're supposed to be. No one's ever told me. I've never really paid attention to ball size and whether so I have no idea. I could have small balls and not know. I could have big balls and not know. All I know is it's not uncomfortable when I ride a bike.
Well, this is what you do.
Matt, your number one player is Jamar Chase. That's some pretty big balls
Theo,
right now.
Here's the test to tell if you have big balls or not. You stand at a full-length mirror,
Okay.
turn your back, and look back into the mirror. And if you could see the sack hanging low, you have long balls.
That's a big sack, though, Alan. That's not balls.
Right. Well,
a big
the sack usually
would be
is
like an old man.
Right, but in that, I have another story about that. I'll never forget.
I don't have a loose, saggy sack. My sack is, I think, pretty tight.
Yeah. Well, that's the sign of aging for men, right? The long sack.
Yeah.
I used to have a baseball coach that he's one of these guys that was very comfortable in the 90s undressing in front of like the team. And I'll never forget. It was disturbing to me. I still think about it when he took off his pants and he was just talking to me about like third base or whatever it was. And his sack, I mean, I'm not kidding. It almost hit the floor. Like we all know that gym teacher, but this guy was, I mean, he was just a product of his time.
Wait, we all know that gym teacher?
The one that was like way too like the guy that showered in the locker room, and the guy was just way too comfortable, dressing in front of people. Not because he was perverted or anything, but just because he came from a time where like, towel snapping and
towel snapping?
It's a bygone era.
What
it's
is
a bygone
he
era
talking
for Alan.
about? He thinks that everybody knows that lunch lady that's hitting on the students, and everybody knows that gym. Now we're back. I think it was the ball talk. I think God came down with a lightning bolt and struck down the show.
Jesus loves
it was just because it was like it wasn't because he was offended by the perverted nature of the conversation. It was that we weren't talking enough Dynasty.
Alan's PE teacher somehow hacked in before Alan could tell the full story.
He's like, no, yeah.
He's like, no, my life will be ruined, Alan.
All right. Let's finish. You want to just go right back to Dynasty? We got 3 more topics I really want to ask you guys about. So let's just go back to it.
Hit me. I can't guarantee that we're gonna. This show will keep going because the God is very angry with us outside my window right now.
God's been angry with me for years, just to let you know.
Well, the ball's hanging so low. I mean, that's a sad state of affairs, man. You can definitely blame God for that.
Yeah. Well, like I said, I've stopped cursing God a long time ago for the deformities that He's given me. I want to talk about Superflex sleepers. I know that's kind of like a buzzy word, using alliteration, but in Superflex drafts, not everybody can have 2 top 12 quarterbacks. And then sometimes the value guys in Dynasty drafts, it's just too good to pass on the position players. So let's talk about some of the guys that go at the end that have a lot of question marks that you think could actually have some real value this year and at least buoy you. I'm talking about let's talk about the Jimmy Garoppolos. Let's talk about the Sam Howells, specifically Podfather. Baker Mayfield.
Ugh.
I mean, he's going after some non-starters. He's got 2 good receivers. He's looking like he's the starter. He doesn't want Tampa Bay to get the first overall pick. Where are you going to be? Is there any dynasty value before the season starts in Superflex leagues?
4 straight seasons with Baker Mayfield rushing for 130-plus yards. So the guy can run around a little bit, too, and he's got great weapons. Right. Well, not great. I mean, if you unzip the back of Mike Evans' jersey, dust would just come out. So Mike Evans, another great guy to trade to a win now team if you can get Skyy Moore. But Baker Mayfield is going to be the starter. It's not Kyle Trask. He can't play, and he's not interested actually in putting in the work either. It's not going to be Blaine Gabbert. So as long as he's healthy. And Baker Mayfield's been playing hurt, been playing with torn ligaments in his shoulder and broken ribs. So he's, all accounts, off-season, healthy, has Chris Godwin, an elite receiver, and Mike Evans. At least Mike Evans commands the attention of the defenses, even though if he's not efficient any longer. And he's got Rachaad White out of the backfield. And it's a very winnable division, right? They could definitely put up some points in this division against these defenses. I kind of like it. I kind of like what you're saying, Baker Mayfield late as sort of an emergency third quarterback. I'd prefer a better quarterback as my third quarterback in Superflex, but it's an emergency third quarterback and a guy I'd love to get as my fourth quarterback. What I like to do is actually get 4 quarterbacks that are starters by tapping into a Mayfield at the end, a Sam Darnold at the end. I talked about Sam Darnold already, but Sam Darnold, the case for Sam Darnold is easy, that they have great weapons, that he could potentially be the number 2 there to start the season, and that Kyle Shanahan secretly wants him to be the starter and to fulfill his destiny. Just another quarterback that Kyle Shanahan has brought back to life, the Dr. Frankenstein of the NFL, Dr. Frankenstein of quarterbacks. So you have Debo, you have Ayuk, you have Kittle, you have McCaffrey. Sam Darnold's had no weapons to speak of throughout his career. He's had nothing to work with. Just when he was about to get Garrett Wilson, they ship him to Carolina. Okay, where his best receiver was DJ Moore for a period of time. That's the best receiver he's had throughout his entire career. He's been set up to fail by a turnstile of coaches, of bottom-tier offenses, porous offensive lines, a lack of weapons. So we've never seen Sam Darnold in any kind of like a healthy, nurturing, sort of flush with weapons situation as he could be in San Francisco. So he's another guy I like, as well as Desmond Ridder. As long as Trey Lance does not go to Atlanta, I like Desmond Ridder because why the weapons? But Desmond Ridder's even better than Sam Darnold because he has the weapons and he has the mobility. He runs a 4.5, so he can fake to Bijan, roll out, and then score touchdowns at the pylon. He can also throw the ball up to Drake London and Kyle Pitts. There's lots of ways that Atlanta can score points with Desmond Ridder involved, at the cost of Bijan Robinson touches in the red zone, but that's going to happen. Teams are going to load up on Bijan inside the 5, force Desmond Ridder to throw, and oftentimes he's going to pull it down himself and run it in. And so that's why I love Desmond Ridder. Of all these, fringy second-year quarterbacks like Sam Howell, I prefer Desmond Ridder. I don't know why Desmond Ridder isn't closer to Jordan Love in Dynasty Superflex ADP. Because
it's not close. It's not even close to the ADP.
It's not even close. But to me, Ridder actually has more going for him in terms of supporting cast and overall athleticism.
I get a lot of pushback from this, but I think there's a chance that Desmond Ridder keeps his job for next year. Based on just the quality of the weapons and the fact that I think Atlanta's going to win some games. And Matt, you bring up a fact that like Desmond Ridder is at a discounted spot. Ridder's quarterback 29 in FFPC Superflex startups. So like if you compare him to like where the Mac Jones tier is, he's got much higher quality weapons, less question marks about the offense at this point, and you're getting him like 20 spots lower in startup value. The Darnold is the cheapest play possible in these Superflex startups. And I think one play you can accomplish pretty easily, Alan, is getting Purdy and Darnold on the same team, and I think you have a path to potentially top 16 weekly production with a really low cost of one of them. I mean, Darnold's practically free, and then Baker Mayfield. I agree. There's some interesting value there. There's still the perception of the quarterback battle. I'm with Matt. I don't think Kyle Trask has a chance here. I think that this is Baker Mayfield all the way. And he has the quality weapons here, and he's got just enough rushing ability that he could be productive. And Tampa Bay should be in pretty positive game scripts. And at the end of the day, when you have Mike Evans, you have Chris Godwin, you have Rachaad White, you've got enough weapons there that Baker Mayfield could easily, beat his ADP. It's a very short-term buy. Of all the guys Matt, talked about, Ritter probably has the most 2-year value of any of them because his age and his running ability, and the fact that Atlanta, I think, is going to price themselves out of the elite quarterback tier. But they're interesting. Like, they're all pretty interesting names right now, Alan.
Keep in mind that Mike Evans, you could say he's dust, this, that. If you made it through with Mike Evans, he was literally, I know we use the term league winner a lot, guys. He literally was a league winner, going off for 200 yards and multiple touchdowns in the last week. Now, could be just a coincidence, but Mike Evans, he showed that he still has that upside. Podfather, the thing I wanted to ask you is that, could Baker Mayfield, I know it sounds crazy now, but we thought this about Geno Smith last year, right? Could it be this year's Geno Smith?
Someone has to be. Like, well, I guess not every year we have a Geno Smith, but a total quarterback, renovation is very possible, right? A complete resurgence is absolutely for some quarterback, right? To be resurrected is absolutely possible. It happens most years. We see at least one resurrection, not every year. It would be Baker Mayfield. It was going to be anybody this year. It's not going to be Carson Wentz. I'm sure he's not even signed yet. And in terms of young players, who's going to be this year, say Davis Mills, Aiden O'Connell is an option, right? Aiden O'Connell was relatively efficient at Purdue, and he's what they have behind Jimmy Garoppolo in Las Vegas. It was Stidham flash, and the fact they couldn't hold on to him was just weird to me. I couldn't believe it. I was like, okay, look, I think they're going to give Stidham a chance. And then suddenly now he's in Denver, and it's Aiden O'Connell. It could be this year's Davis Mills, where Davis Mills, after his rookie year, right, let's say February 2022, Davis Mills had real value in Superflex. What could you have gotten for Davis Mills in 2022, early 2022, Theo, in trades? A second rounder at least, right?
Easily. Yeah. People are flipping him
not
for
a first.
seconds. Yeah, not a first, but Superflex second, absolutely. I mean, the idea, like, people are so very short-term thinking, when they have a quarterback need in Superflex, and you can always flip those kind of guys. I'll say if there is a Geno Smith this year, though, it's going to come from one of those Washington quarterbacks. And I think the interesting one is if Jacoby Brissett replaces Howell, and let's say Washington starts out the year, I'm just looking at their schedule. Arizona is game 1, winnable game. They'll be favored at home. But then it's at Denver, it's Buffalo in Washington, it's the Eagles in Philly, it's Chicago, and then it's in Atlanta. If they lose that Atlanta game and they're like 1-4 and they switch to Brissett's really interesting to me because he's free. We've seen him have like some decent fantasy numbers, and we like the weapons in Washington. So I think like that's the thing about Geno, like it's never going to be replicated because he was literally free. And he comes in and gives you that big-time season. So if it's going to be somebody doing a Geno, it's going to be one of those Washington quarterbacks this year.
Yeah, and Brissett has had multiple seasons, 3, with 200-plus rushing yards. He had a season, 2 seasons actually, with 4 rushing touchdowns. And now you give him McLaurin and Dotson and Curtis Samuel and Antonio Gibson. That's great weapons. And it's going to be brutal for Sam Howell to survive that early season schedule. Absolutely brutal. So I don't like his chances, actually. I don't like Sam Howell's chances, period. He's a 5th-round pick. He's undersized. He's not athletic. He had some rushing yards in college because of the system he was operating in. That's it. So the fascination with Sam Howell is inexplicable to me. And, at ADP, I'm more likely to push the button on Jacoby Brissett. Hey, I want to take a moment to thank you for tuning in. It's important to me that all of our media be free. This is only possible because of you allowing a true independent sports media enterprise to thrive unlike any other in the business. So please subscribe to the All In Package to continue to make all of this possible, to ensure that all of our stats, information, data, content is available to you, especially you, the people that get the site and get the show.